Maria held the tea tray with trembling hands as she climbed the mansion's marble staircase. 2 years working in that house in Kensington, in the Greater London area, and she had never felt a tightness in her chest like the one she felt at that moment. Something was deeply wrong with Mrs. Eleanor, and with each passing day the sense of urgency grew inside her like a storm about to break. The Sterling mansion was imposing, with its 3 floors, heated swimming pool, and gardens that looked like they were straight out of a design magazine. Maria had been hired by Mr. Richard Sterling, a tech entrepreneur who spent more time traveling for business than at home. He was a polite man who had always treated her with respect, but his constant absence left the house under the command of his wife, Veronica. Veronica Sterling was the opposite of her husband. Blonde, always impeccably made up, she lived glued to her phone doing live streams and posting photos for her nearly 200,000 Instagram followers. Maria watched her spend hours choosing the perfect angles for her selfies, while the house, and especially Mrs. Eleanor, her mother-in-law, withered in silence. Mrs. Eleanor was 78 years old and was Richard's mother. When Maria started working there, the elderly woman was a vibrant person, full of stories about her youth in the Cotswolds, always smiling and grateful for every small gesture of affection. She loved to sit on the veranda in the late afternoons, sipping tea and watching the birds in the garden. Maria had grown accustomed to keeping her company during these moments, listening to her stories and sharing laughter. But in the last 3 months, everything had changed drastically. Mrs. Eleanor had practically disappeared from the social life of the house. She no longer came down for afternoon tea, didn't ask to take her walks in the garden, and when Maria saw her, the old woman seemed a shadow of her former self. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, now seemed dull, distant, as if she were trapped somewhere far, far away. Maria knocked softly on Mrs. Eleanor's bedroom door. There was no answer. She turned the knob and entered, carrying the tray with the chamomile tea that Veronica had insisted she bring. The room was in semi-darkness, the heavy curtains blocking almost all the afternoon sunlight. The air had a strange smell, a mixture of medicine and something Maria couldn't identify. Mrs. Eleanor was lying in bed so still that for a moment Maria's heart leaped with fear. She quickly approached and saw the gentle rise and fall of the elderly woman's chest. She was alive but deeply asleep. Maria placed the tray on the bedside table and noticed something that made her frown. There were at least 5 different blister packs of pills scattered there, along with half-empty glasses of water and an untouched plate of food from lunch. "Maria, where is your efficiency?" Veronica's sharp voice made her jump. Her employer was at the door, wearing a light pink designer dress and holding her phone as if it were an extension of her hand. She strode into the room, her high heels echoing on the wooden floor. "I brought the tea for Mrs. Eleanor, as you asked," Maria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Veronica looked at her sleeping mother-in-law with an expression Maria couldn't quite decipher, but which seemed to be somewhere between irritation and satisfaction. "She's resting. She's been very tired lately, you know. Age takes its toll. But she's hardly eaten, Mrs. Sterling. I've noticed her meals come back almost untouched. Perhaps we should call a doctor," Maria suggested, choosing her words carefully. Veronica's eyes narrowed. "We already have doctors looking after her. Besides, Maria, you are paid to clean and cook, not to give opinions on medical matters you don't understand. Mrs. Eleanor is under my care, and that's all you need to know." The tone was icy, sharp as a blade. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. "Yes, Mrs. Sterling, I'm sorry." As Maria was about to leave, she heard a low moan from the bed. Mrs. Eleanor was stirring, her lips trembling as if she were trying to speak. Maria turned instinctively, but Veronica placed herself between her and the bed. "You can go, Maria. I'll take care of my mother-in-law. Go and prepare dinner," Veronica ordered, practically pushing Maria out of the room. The door closed with a firm click, and Maria clearly heard the key turning in the lock from the inside. Maria went down the stairs with her heart pounding. It wasn't normal to lock an elderly woman in her room. It wasn't normal to have that many medications. And it definitely wasn't normal the way Veronica looked at her mother-in-law, with that coldness, that indifference that bordered on something much more sinister. That night, Mariah could barely sleep in her small room at the back of the house. She lived there from Monday to Saturday, returning to her own home in Croydon only on Sundays to visit her mother and her 12-year-old daughter, Julia. She needed that job. The salary was good and allowed her to send Julia to a private school, fulfilling her dream of giving her daughter the opportunities she never had. But something inside Mariah, a voice coming from a very deep place in her conscience, told her she couldn't simply ignore what was happening to Mrs. Eleanor. The elderly woman had always been kind to her, treating her not as a maid, but as a person of value. Mrs. Eleanor would ask about Julia, take an interest in her studies, and more than once had given Mariah extra money saying it was to buy something special for the girl. The next morning, Mariah woke up early and prepared breakfast. Veronica came down around 10 o'clock, already perfectly put together, and barely glanced at Mariah as she picked up her cup of organic coffee with almond milk. She spent the next 30 minutes making Instagram stories, talking about her morning routine and recommending beauty products to her followers. Mariah took advantage of Veronica's distraction and discreetly went up to the second floor. Mrs. Eleanor's room was at the end of the hall, isolated from the other bedrooms. She pressed her ear to the door and heard nothing. She rang the bell that had been installed next to the door, a feature that was supposed to allow Mrs. Eleanor to call for help if she needed it. Minutes passed with no response. Mariah was about to go back down when she heard footsteps behind her. It was Bernard, the property's security guard, a man in his 50s who had worked there for 5 years. "She's not doing well at all, is she?" he said quietly, looking around to make sure they were alone. "I saw her the other day when the missus opened the door to get something. Mrs. Eleanor looked like a ghost, Mariah. She who was always so strong, so cheerful. So you've noticed it too?" Mariah felt relieved not to be the only one. Bernard nodded, concern etched on his time-worn face. "And there's more. Last night I was doing my rounds and I saw Mrs. Veronica leaving Mrs. Eleanor's room late, almost midnight. She was carrying a bag and seemed nervous, looking from side to side. When she saw me, she practically ran to her own room." Mariah felt a knot in her stomach. Veronica had no reason to be in her mother-in-law's room at that hour, especially acting so suspiciously. "Bernard, do you think we should call Mr. Sterling? Let him know his mother isn't well." Bernard sighed heavily. "I've already tried, Mariah. I called him too, weeks ago, but Mrs. Veronica answered. She said her husband was in important meetings and that I shouldn't bother him with nonsense. After that, she scolded me, saying I was overstepping my bounds. I was afraid of losing my job." Mariah understood perfectly. Jobs like these weren't easy to find, especially for people like them, without a university education. But there was something bigger at stake here. She could feel it in her bones. Mrs. Eleanor needed help, and apparently she and Bernard were the only people in that house who cared enough to do something about it. Over the next few days, Mariah began to pay attention to every detail. She noticed that Veronica went up to Mrs. Eleanor's room with a tray 3 times a day. She brought food and, invariably, a row of colorful pills. Mariah also noticed that after these visits, any sound from Mrs. Eleanor's room ceased completely, as if the elderly woman fell into a deep and unnatural sleep. One afternoon, Mariah was cleaning the second-floor hallway when Veronica came out of Mrs. Eleanor's room, locking the door behind her as she always did. She was distracted, replying to messages on her phone, and didn't notice she had dropped something on the floor. Mariah waited until Veronica had gone downstairs before approaching. It was a half-empty blister pack of pills. Mariah discreetly picked it up and put it in her apron pocket, her heart pounding against her ribs. Later, in her room, she examined the packet. The name of the medication was complicated, full of letters and numbers she didn't recognize. Mariah wasn't highly educated, but she knew how to use the internet on her old phone. She typed the name of the drug into Google, and what she read made her hold her breath. It was a powerful sedative, used for severe cases of insomnia or extreme anxiety. The leaflet warned of dependency and against administering it to the elderly without strict medical supervision. Mariah photographed the packet with her phone, her hands shaking slightly. She was beginning to piece together a puzzle in her mind, and the picture that was forming was terrifying. But she needed more proof, something concrete she could show Mr. Richard when he finally returned from his business trip in Europe. Scheduled to last another 2 weeks, the opportunity Mariah was waiting for came unexpectedly on a rainy Thursday morning. Veronica had to leave for an appointment with her esthetician, a facial contouring session she had scheduled weeks ago and which, in her own words on social media, could not be postponed under any circumstances. She spent over half an hour getting ready, checking her appearance from every possible angle, and left the mansion driving her white BMW, leaving a trail of expensive perfume down the hallway. Mariah waited until she was sure Veronica had truly gone. She saw the electronic gate close through the window after the car passed. Her heart hammered in her chest as she went up the stairs to the second floor. She knew she was risking her job, perhaps even facing an accusation of invasion of privacy, but the image of Mrs. Eleanor wasting away alone in that room propelled her forward. The door was locked, as always. Mariah bit her lower lip, thinking quickly. She remembered there was a set of master keys in Richard's office, keys she used for cleaning the rooms. With quick steps, she went down to the office on the first floor, grabbed the keyring and ran back, praying silently that one of those keys would work. The third key turned smoothly in the lock. Mariah pushed the door open slowly, the creak of the hinges sounding absurdly loud in the silence of the house. The room was dark and stuffy, the smell of medicine even stronger than last time. Mariah approached the bed where Mrs. Eleanor lay motionless, covered up to her neck by a duvet too heavy for the London heat. "Mrs. Eleanor," Mariah called softly, touching the elderly woman's shoulder. "Mrs. Eleanor, it's me, Mariah." At first there was no response. Then slowly, as if emerging from a very deep well, Mrs. Eleanor's eyes opened. They took a moment to focus, rolling disorientedly until they finally landed on Mariah's face. For a second, there was no recognition, only confusion and fear. But then something changed. A spark of consciousness lit up in those tired eyes. "Mariah?" The voice was a hoarse whisper, almost inaudible. "Is that you?" "Yes, Mrs. Eleanor. It's me." Mariah felt tears burn in her eyes as she saw the state of the woman she so admired. Mrs. Eleanor's skin had a sickly pallor, her lips were chapped, and she seemed to have lost at least 20 pounds. "How are you?" "Feeling?" Mrs. Eleanor tried to sit up, but her muscles didn't seem to respond properly. Mariah helped her, arranging the pillows behind her back. The elderly woman grabbed Mariah's hand with surprising strength, her bony fingers digging into the housekeeper's skin. "You're the only one who sees me," Mrs. Eleanor whispered, her words coming out in broken fragments, as if each one required immense effort. "The only one who truly sees me, Mariah. The others, they look through me as if I don't exist anymore." "What do you mean?" Mariah sat on the edge of the bed, holding the old woman's trembling hand firmly. "What's happening here? Why are you always sleeping? Why don't you eat anymore?" Mrs. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears that trickled slowly down her lined cheeks. "Her, Veronica, my son's wife. Mariah, I'm afraid of her. I'm so afraid." Mariah felt a shiver run through her entire body. "Afraid of what, Mrs. Eleanor? What has she done to you?" Mrs. Eleanor glanced at the door, as if Veronica could appear at any moment. "She gives me pills, so many pills, 3 times a day, sometimes more. She says they're vitamins, that they're to make me feel better, but I know they're not. After I take them, everything gets fuzzy, my head feels heavy, and I can't think straight, I can't call for help. I can't even get out of bed." Mariah's hands began to tremble. "How long has this been going on?" "Months, I think. I've lost track of the days. At first she was subtle. She said I was stressed, that I needed to rest more. But then she started increasing the doses and I got weaker and weaker." Mrs. Eleanor's voice failed and she had a fit of dry coughing. Mariah quickly grabbed a glass of water from the table and helped her drink. "She doesn't let me have visitors. She tells my son that I've asked to be alone, that I'm depressed and don't want to see anyone. But it's a lie, Mariah. It's all a lie." "And Mr. Richard? He doesn't notice anything?" Mariah asked, feeling anger rise in her chest. "My son is always traveling. When he's here, she pretends to take care of me, acts like the perfect daughter-in-law, and I'm always so doped up that I can barely form a complete sentence. He thinks it's just old age, that I'm becoming senile. Mrs. Eleanor squeezed Mariah's hand even tighter. But I'm not crazy, Mariah. I know what she's doing. She wants me out of the way. She wants everything, this house, the money, everything. Mariah took a deep breath, trying to process everything she was hearing. Mrs. Eleanor, are you sure about this? Because these are very serious accusations. I heard her on the phone once. It was a few weeks ago, during one of the few moments when the drugs were wearing off. She was in my room thinking I was asleep. She was talking to someone, saying that soon everything would be hers, that the old woman wouldn't last much longer, that she had a plan. Mrs. Eleanor's eyes widened with renewed terror. Mariah, I think she wants to make me disappear, one way or another. Mariah felt nauseous. She had always known Veronica was cold, self-centered and materialistic, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Mrs. Eleanor, I'm going to help you. I'm going to find out what's happening, and I'll tell Mr. Richard, I promise. No, no, Mrs. Eleanor grabbed Mariah desperately. She'll deny everything. She'll say you're lying, that you want to manipulate me to get my money. She's smart, Mariah, very smart, and my son trusts her blindly. He would never believe you over his own wife. Mariah knew Mrs. Eleanor was right. Without concrete proof, it would be a housekeeper's word against the boss's wife's. And Veronica had a huge advantage, the impeccable image of a devoted wife on social media, always posting messages about family and love. Who would believe that behind that facade was a woman capable of something so cruel? Then I'll get proof, Mariah said with determination, proof that Mr. Richard won't be able to ignore. Mariah spent the next few minutes helping Mrs. Eleanor eat a little bread and drink more water. The elderly woman was famished, but her stomach couldn't handle much food at once. Mariah promised to return when she could, bringing light, nutritious meals. She also discreetly emptied some of the glasses of old water and checked the medication packets on the table, photographing each one. Before leaving, Mrs. Eleanor held Mariah's hand again. Thank you for seeing me, for truly seeing me. You have a good heart, Mariah, just like my mother had. Her name was Mariah too, you know, I think. That's why I feel so close to you. Mariah felt the tears finally stream down her face. I won't let anything happen to you, Mrs. Eleanor. I promise you that. She left the room, locked the door again, and went down the stairs on shaky legs. Her mind was racing. She needed a plan, a way to document what was happening without being discovered. Veronica was careful, but no one was perfect. There was a loophole somewhere, and Mariah was determined to find it. That night, Mariah rummaged through her belongings until she found what she was looking for, an old mobile phone she had kept when she bought a new one 2 years ago. It still worked, even if the battery didn't last long. She charged it fully and set it to record video, silencing all notification sounds. The next morning, when Veronica left for her Pilates class, Mariah would place that phone in Mrs. Eleanor's room. Hidden somewhere, it could capture what really happened in that gloomy room. It was risky, absurdly risky. If Veronica found out, Mariah would not only lose her job but could face legal consequences. But when she closed her eyes, all she saw was Mrs. Eleanor's frightened face, her words echoing in her mind. You're the only one who sees me. Mariah had never been anyone's hero. She was just a hard-working woman, a single mother, trying to survive and give her daughter a better future. But now she had a choice: turn her back on the suffering of a helpless old woman, or risk everything to do what was right. And in the depths of her heart, Mariah already knew what her choice would be, even if it meant sacrificing everything she had built. Friday dawned with a clear blue sky over Kensington, but Mariah woke with a weight in her stomach that seemed to want to drag her down. She had barely slept, mentally rehearsing every step of the plan she would put into action that morning. The old phone was charged and hidden deep in her apron pocket, ready to be positioned in Mrs. Eleanor's room as soon as the opportunity arose. Veronica came down for breakfast, wearing a designer sportswear set, all done up for her 9 o'clock Pilates class. She was particularly cheerful, talking on the phone with a friend about a charity event happening over the weekend, where she would be one of the hostesses. Mariah watched her from the corner of her eye, serving coffee and preparing the whole wheat toast Veronica insisted on eating every morning. Oh, and after Pilates, I'm going straight to the salon to get my nails done. This new nail artist is simply divine, Veronica was saying on the phone, admiring her perfectly polished nails. I need to look flawless for the event photos. You know how it is, we're always being photographed. Mariah did a quick calculation. Pilates lasted an hour, plus the salon. Veronica would be out for it. Least 3 hours, maybe 4 if she stopped for lunch with friends, as she often did. It would be enough time. At 8:40, Veronica finally left, leaving a trail of French perfume through the living room. Mariah waited until she heard the sound of the electronic gate closing before running up the stairs. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. With trembling hands, she unlocked the door to Mrs. Eleanor's room and went inside. The old woman was awake this time, staring at the ceiling with a vacant expression. When she saw Mariah, a small light flickered in her eyes. "Mariah, you came back." "I brought you a real breakfast," Mariah said, showing the tray she had prepared with fruit, warm bread, and fresh juice. "And I came to do something else, something that will help us." Mariah quickly explained her plan while helping Mrs. Eleanor sit up and eat. She would position the phone behind a flower vase on the bookshelf with the camera facing the bed. Anything that happened there would be recorded, but it had to be at an angle where Veronica wouldn't notice the device. "Are you sure, Mariah?" Mrs. Eleanor asked, genuine concern in her weak voice. "If she finds out, you'll lose your job. You have a daughter to raise." "That's exactly why I have to do this," Mariah replied firmly, "because I want my Julia to grow up knowing her mother did the right thing, even when it was hard, and because you don't deserve to go through this alone." Carefully, Mariah positioned the phone behind an arrangement of artificial flowers on the high shelf, adjusting the angle several times until she was sure the bed was completely in frame. She activated the continuous recording mode and turned the screen brightness to its minimum. From where she stood, the device was almost invisible, just another dark object among many in the gloom of the room. "There," Mariah said, checking one last time. "Now we just wait." She spent a few more minutes with Mrs. Eleanor, helping her finish her breakfast and talking quietly about trivial things, trying to bring a bit of normalcy and comfort to that oppressive environment. When she finally left, locking the door behind her, Mariah went down the stairs with a mix of hope and terror. There was no turning back now. If Veronica discovered the phone, the consequences would be devastating. The next few hours dragged on like molasses. Mariah tried to keep busy with household chores, cleaning and organizing the house, but her mind was upstairs, on the second floor, imagining what the camera might be capturing. Or not capturing. What if Veronica didn't go into the room today? What if she suspected something and found the phone? What if the battery died before it recorded anything useful? Around 11:30, Mariah heard the sound of the electronic gate. Her heart leaped. Veronica was back early. She peeked through the window and saw the white BMW parking in the garage. Veronica got out of the car, carrying several shopping bags, apparently in a good mood. She came in through the kitchen door, where Mariah was preparing lunch. "Mariah, heat up that vegetable soup that's in the fridge." "I'm not very hungry," Veronica said, tossing the bags onto the living room sofa. "And prepare the tray for my mother-in-law. Her pills are on the counter in my suite. Can you get them?" "Yes, Mrs. Sterling," Mariah replied, her voice coming out shakier than she intended. Veronica looked at her with narrowed eyes. "Are you all right? You seem nervous." "I'm just a little tired, Mrs. Sterling. I didn't sleep well last night." Veronica shrugged, already losing interest. "Then go to bed earlier tonight. I can't have an unproductive employee working here." Mariah went up to the master suite, a luxurious room larger than her entire house in Croydon. In the marble bathroom on the counter was an organizer box full of medications. Mariah quickly photographed everything with her personal phone, capturing the names of the drugs, the dosages, everything. Then she took the ones Veronica used for Mrs. Eleanor, clearly separated from the others, and went downstairs. While heating the soup, Mariah prepared the tray. Veronica came into the kitchen, checking her phone, making stories about her day's purchases. She took 3 different pills from the packet and placed them in a small cup next to the soup bowl. Mariah watched everything, engraving every detail into her memory. The pills were large, of different colors, one white, one light blue, and one yellow. Veronica handled them with a dexterity that suggested practice, routine. This was not something new. She had been doing it long enough for it to be automatic. "I'll take it to her," Mariah said impulsively. Veronica's eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Mariah instantly regret speaking. "No, I'll take it. You stay here and finish making lunch." Mariah watched Veronica go up the stairs carrying the tray, her heart sinking. She needed that recording. She needed the phone to capture whatever happened in that room. And now there was nothing she could do but wait and pray the device wouldn't be discovered. Half an hour later, Veronica came down. The tray was still full, the soup untouched. "She has no appetite today," Veronica said indifferently, placing the tray in the sink. "But at least she took her medicine. That's the most important thing." Mariah cleaned the kitchen after lunch with automatic movements, her mind elsewhere. She needed to retrieve that phone before the battery died or before someone discovered it. But how? Veronica was home now, working in her office on the first floor, editing photos for her social media, and the door to Mrs. Eleanor's room was locked, as always. The opportunity came in the middle of the afternoon. Veronica received a call from her personal stylist about the dress she would wear to the charity event. There was a problem with the fitting, and she needed to go to the shop immediately for a try-on. She left in a hurricane of irritation, complaining loudly about incompetence and lack of professionalism. As soon as the car left the garage, Mariah ran upstairs. Her fingers trembled so much she almost dropped the keyring. She finally managed to open the door. The room was even darker than in the morning, the curtains drawn, blocking all daylight. Mrs. Eleanor was deeply asleep, her breathing heavy and irregular. Mariah went straight to the bookshelf and grabbed the phone. The battery was at 15%, but it had been recording. Hours and hours of footage. With her heart pounding, she stopped the recording, left the room, and ran down to her small room at the back of the house. There, she connected the phone to the charger and began to watch the recordings, fast-forwarding through the parts where nothing happened. And then she saw it. The camera had captured everything. Veronica entering the room with the tray, waking Mrs. Eleanor up abruptly. Mariah turned up the volume and felt her blood run cold. Veronica's voice was cold, cruel, completely different from the sweet tone she used on social media. "Wake up, old woman, time for your little pills." Veronica held the pills in one hand and a glass of water in the other. Mrs. Eleanor tried to turn her face away, murmuring weak protests, but Veronica was relentless. "Either you take them nicely now or I'll have to shove them down your throat, and we both know you don't want that, do you?" "No, please." Mrs. Eleanor's voice was a broken whisper. "I don't want any more. They make me sick. I can't think." "But that's precisely the point, dear mother-in-law." Veronica smiled, a terrible smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You thinking is not part of the plan. You just need to do as I say. Take the pills now, or I'll call Richard and tell him you're getting violent, that you're having episodes. Do you want to be committed to an asylum? Because I can arrange that easily." Mariah watched on the screen, horrified, as Mrs. Eleanor began to cry while reluctantly opening her mouth. Veronica forced the pills in and made the elderly woman drink water. "Good girl, now sleep, and don't worry, very soon you won't." And don't have to worry about anything anymore. Soon it will all be over. Mariah watched the video 3 times, each time feeling a more intense mix of horror and rage. Veronica's words echoed in her mind. Soon it will all be over. It was a veiled threat, but an unequivocal one. Mrs. Eleanor wasn't just being sedated, she was being systematically destroyed, physically and mentally. And now Mariah had the proof, Veronica's own confession captured on video and audio. But having the proof was only half the battle. Mariah needed to get it into the right hands, and those hands belonged to Richard Sterling, who was somewhere in Europe, probably in endless meetings, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding in his own home. Mariah knew Richard had a personal email. She had seen it a few times when cleaning his office. But could she send the video without Veronica intercepting it? Mariah took her personal phone and tried to recall Richard's email address. She vaguely remembered seeing correspondence addressed to him, but the full email escaped her. Frustrated, she realized she would have to go into his office and look for a reference. But how could she do that with Veronica at home? The answer came the next day, a Saturday. Veronica woke up earlier than usual, all excited because the charity event was that night. She spent the entire morning between her bedroom, bathroom and closet, trying on the dress, testing makeup, taking selfies. Mariah took advantage of a moment when Veronica was completely absorbed in a video call with her personal stylist and slipped into Richard's office. The room smelled of leather and fine wood, the walls lined with diplomas and certificates. Mariah went straight to the desk, carefully opening drawers, looking for any document with her boss's email. Finally, in a folder of business correspondence, she found it, richard.sterling@gmail.com. She quickly photographed the email and left the office, returning to her duties as if nothing had happened. "Mariah!" Veronica's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Where were you?" "I was cleaning the guest bathroom, Mrs. Sterling," Mariah lied, her heart racing. "Do you need anything?" Veronica studied her with suspicious eyes for a long moment. "Yes, I want you to go up and take lunch to my mother-in-law, but don't take long. I have several things for you to do before I leave this afternoon." Mariah prepared, the tray with trembling hands. She watched Veronica place the pills in the small cup with that same mechanical dexterity. Her employer handed the tray to Mariah and surprisingly didn't insist on going up with her. She was too busy with her preparations for the event. Upstairs, Mariah found Mrs. Eleanor in an even worse state. The elderly woman could barely keep her eyes open. Her skin had a deathly pallor. Mariah helped her drink some soup, but Mrs. Eleanor vomited almost immediately. The pills were there in the cup, waiting. Mariah looked at them with hatred and, on impulse, threw them all into the toilet and flushed. She knew this would have consequences, but she couldn't. She could not give them to the old woman. "Mrs. Eleanor," Mariah whispered, holding the lady's cold hand, "I'm going to send the proof to your son today. He'll know everything." "Be careful, Mariah," Mrs. Eleanor murmured, each word an effort. "She's dangerous, more than you can imagine." Mariah came down with the still full tray, making up an excuse that Mrs. Eleanor had fallen asleep before eating. Veronica barely paid attention, too busy doing her nails for the event. At 4 in the afternoon, she finally left, stunning in her designer dress, for the event that would last late into the night. This was Mariah's chance. She waited until she was sure Veronica had really gone, then ran to her room. She needed to transfer the video from the old phone to her personal phone, and then send it to Richard's email. But the file was large, very large. It would take hours to upload from her phone with its slow internet. Mariah thought quickly. The computer in Richard's office had high-speed internet. She could use that. With her heart in her mouth, she returned to the office, turned on the computer and waited for it to boot up. There was no password. Richard apparently trusted that no one would mess with his things. Mariah connected her phone to the computer, transferred the video, and opened Richard's personal email. She began to type, her hands sweating over the keyboard. "Mr. Sterling, my name is Mariah. I have been an employee in your home for 2 years. I need you to watch this video urgently. It's about Mrs. Eleanor. Please come home as soon as possible. Your mother is in danger." Mariah attached the video and clicked send. The progress bar began to climb slowly. 5%, 10%, 15%. Mariah bit her lip, her eyes fixed on the screen. 20%, 25%. Suddenly, she heard a noise upstairs. Her blood ran cold. Was someone in the house? She abandoned the computer and ran to the hallway. The noise came again, more clearly now. Footsteps. Someone was walking on the second floor. Mariah went up the stairs slowly, each step creaking under her feet. The hallway was empty, but the door to Mrs. Eleanor's room was ajar. She knew she had left that. Door locked. With her heart pounding, Mariah pushed the door open. The room was empty. Mrs. Eleanor wasn't there. The bed was empty, the duvet thrown on the floor. Mariah felt panic rise in her throat. Where was the old woman? How had she gotten out if she could barely stand? "Mrs. Eleanor," Mariah called, running down the hall, opening doors. "Mrs. Eleanor, where are you?" She found her in the bathroom at the end of the hall, collapsed on the cold porcelain floor. The old woman was conscious but disoriented, shaking violently. "Mariah, I tried to leave the room. I tried to call for help, but my legs won't obey me." Mariah helped Mrs. Eleanor up, supporting almost the entire weight of the frail woman. She took her back to bed, covering her with blankets, trying to warm her. "You can't do this, Mrs. Eleanor. You're not strong enough, but I've already sent the video to your son. He'll know everything." "Will she notice the pills weren't taken?" she questioned, her eyes full of fear. Mariah froze. She hadn't thought of that. If Veronica had gone into the room before leaving and noticed the pills were missing, she would. No, Mariah had done something. Mariah ran back down to the office. The email was still sending. 40%, 45%. Come on, she whispered to the screen. 70%, 80%. Mariah heard the sound of the electronic gate. No, it couldn't be. Veronica couldn't be back already. She got up from the chair and ran to the window. The white BMW was pulling into the garage. Veronica was back. Why? Had the event been cancelled? Mariah ran back to the computer. 90%. The front door opened. Mariah could hear Veronica's heels echoing on the marble of the entrance hall. 95%. Footsteps approaching the office. 98%. "Mariah, are you in there?" Veronica's voice was strangely calm. 100%. Message sent. Mariah quickly disconnected the phone, closed the email and turned off the monitor. But she didn't have time to shut down the computer. The office door opened and Veronica was there, still in her evening gown, but her expression was one of pure fury. "What are you doing in my husband's office?" Veronica asked, her voice low and dangerous. I was cleaning," Mariah stammered, trying to get past Veronica towards the door. But Veronica blocked her path. "Cleaning? With the computer on?" She approached the computer, moved the mouse, and the screen lit up. Her eyes widened when she saw the email client still open, even though Mariah had closed the message. Veronica clicked on the sent folder and there it was, the message to Richard with the video attached. Veronica's face turned red, the veins in her neck bulging. You meddling bitch! You were spying on me? You recorded the room?" Veronica grabbed Mariah's arm tightly, her nails digging into her skin. "You had no right to do that." "Yes, I did." Mariah broke free with a shove, adrenaline giving her strength. "You're mistreating Mrs. Eleanor. You're drugging her, keeping her prisoner. I saw everything." Veronica laughed, a high-pitched, humorless sound. "You saw? And what do you think is going to happen now? That my husband will believe you? A simple housekeeper?" She approached the computer, clicked a few times and smiled. "I've just deleted the email from his inbox. He'll never see that message. And you've just lost your job." Mariah felt the floor give way beneath her. Veronica had deleted the email, all the risk she had taken, all the proof she had gathered, all thrown away with a few clicks. The triumphant expression on Veronica's face was unbearable, a venomous smile that clearly said she had won again. "But you don't understand," Mariah tried to argue, even knowing it was useless. "Mr. Richard needs to know what's happening to his mother. You're hurting her." "Hurting her?" Veronica crossed her arms, her posture shifting to something theatrical, rehearsed. "I am caring for an elderly and confused woman. I spend my days trying to get her to take her medicine, prescribed by real doctors, not by employees, who think they know better than professionals. And you, Mariah, you invaded my family's privacy, installed hidden cameras, went through confidential documents. Do you know what that is? A crime. Invasion of privacy. For all I know, I can sue you for this." Mariah felt tears of frustration burn her eyes. "You know what you're saying isn't true. Those medicines aren't prescribed. You're deliberately drugging Mrs. Eleanor." "Prove it," Veronica said with a cold smile. "You deleted the only video you had, didn't you?" "Oh, wait." She grabbed Mariah's phone, which was on the desk. Mariah tried to stop her, but Veronica was faster. She went through the phone, found the video and deleted it, along with all the photos Mariah had taken. "There. Now there's no proof. It's your word against mine. And guess who my husband is going to believe?" Mariah was trembling, with rage, fear and helplessness. She had failed. She had failed Mrs. Eleanor, failed the promise she had made. "I know what I saw. I know what you're doing. And I know what you're doing, Mariah." Veronica took a threatening step towards her. "You're obsessed with my mother-in-law. You want to create problems in my family. Maybe you think that if you cause discord between my husband and me, he'll be grateful to you. Maybe you even have fantasies of taking my place, don't you? A housekeeper wanting to be the lady of the house." The words were so absurd that Mariah couldn't even respond. She just stared at Veronica, seeing for the first time the true extent of the woman's wickedness. Veronica wasn't just harming Mrs. Eleanor. She was an expert manipulator, capable of twisting any situation to her advantage. The sound of Veronica's phone ringing broke the tense silence. She answered, and her voice immediately changed to a sweet, concerned tone. "Darling, you called. Yes, I know you're busy. But something strange happened here at home, and I needed to talk to you." Mariah watched, horrified, as Veronica recounted a completely distorted version of events. She talked about how Mariah had been acting strangely lately, how she was often seen snooping in the office, how Mrs. Eleanor's personal items had gone missing, including some old jewelry. Veronica even cried, perfectly calculated tears streaming down her cheeks as she told her husband she was afraid to confront Mariah alone, but that now, after finding her using his computer without permission, she had no choice. No, love, you don't need to come back now. I know your business is important. I'll handle it. I'm firing her today, and I'll hire a new security company for the house. Yes, I'll take care of everything. I love you too." Veronica hung up and looked at Mariah with that triumphant smile again. "There, you're fired. I want you to pack your things and get out of my house immediately. And if you try to say anything to my husband, if you try to slander me, I swear I'll have you arrested for theft. I can very easily make some jewelry disappear and say it was you. Your word against mine, remember?" Mariah felt a wave of despair. But what about Mrs. Eleanor? Who's going to protect her? "My mother-in-law is being perfectly cared for. Now get out before I call the police and claim you tried to assault me too." Mariah had no choice. With shaky legs and a broken heart, she went up to her small room and began to gather her belongings. 2 old suitcases, some clothes, photos of Julia, her few personal items. Everything she had built in 2 years in that house fit into 2 worn-out suitcases. She thought of Mrs. Eleanor, alone in that room on the 2nd floor, at the mercy of an unscrupulous woman. Before going down, Mariah made a decision. She went to Mrs. Eleanor's room, using the master keys for the last time. The old woman was awake, looking at the window with a distant expression. When she saw Mariah, her eyes filled with tears. "You're leaving. I can feel it." Mariah knelt beside the bed, holding Mrs. Eleanor's hands. "She fired me, but I'm not giving up on you, Mrs. Eleanor. I promise I'll find a way to help. I'll report this to someone. I'll find a way for your son to know the truth." Mrs. Eleanor squeezed Mariah's hands with what little strength she had. "You're a good person, Mariah. My mother would be proud to know someone like you. But please think of your daughter. Don't sacrifice everything for an old woman like me." "You're not just an old woman," Mariah said, the tears finally flowing freely. "You are a person who deserves dignity and respect, and I won't let Veronica win." Mariah left the room and went down the stairs carrying her bags. Veronica was in the entrance hall, filming another story for Instagram, talking about the importance of maintaining healthy boundaries and staying away from negative energy. When she saw Mariah, she stopped recording. "Bernard will see you to the gate. And Mariah, if I were you, I wouldn't try to come back here. I've installed new security cameras. Any attempt to trespass, and I'll call the police." Mariah walked past Veronica without a word, holding her head high. Bernard was waiting at the door, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. He took Mariah's bags and put them in his own car. "I'm so sorry, Mariah," he said quietly as they drove to the gate. "I know you were trying to do the right thing." "Thank you, Bernard." Mariah looked back at the imposing mansion that had been her workplace and home for 2 years. "Take care of Mrs. Eleanor, please. Keep an eye on her. I'll do what I can." Mariah got out of the car at the nearest bus stop. It was almost 7 in the evening, the sky beginning to darken over London. She sat on the bench at the stop, her bags at her feet, and finally allowed the despair to completely wash over her. She had lost her job, her source of income, and worse, she had failed to protect Mrs. Eleanor. Veronica had won. She had twisted everything, erased all the evidence, and now had total control over the helpless old woman. Mariah took out her phone and called her mother, explaining that she would need to come home and stay for a while as she looked for a new job. Her mother didn't ask questions, just said the door was always open, but Mariah barely heard. Her mind was in that mansion in Kensington, in the dark room where Mrs. Eleanor lay alone, probably being forced to take those horrible pills again. For the next 3 days, Mariah barely left her room at her mother's house in Croydon. Julia tried to cheer her up, showing her schoolwork, talking about her friends, but Mariah couldn't focus on anything but Mrs. Eleanor. She had created fake Instagram accounts and started following Veronica, watching all her stories, looking for any clue, any slip-up. And that's when Mariah saw it. On the 3rd day, Veronica posted a story showing an elaborate brunch she had prepared, and in the background, far in the background, through a half-open door, Mariah could see a piece of the 2nd-floor hallway. And in that piece of hallway, there was something that made her heart pound. The door to Mrs. Eleanor's room was wide open, the empty room visible beyond the entrance. Mariah's heart pounded as she saw that image in Veronica's story. Mrs. Eleanor's room was empty, the door wide open. Where was the elderly woman? Had the worst happened? Mariah felt panic spread through her chest like fire. She had to do something. She had to act now before it was too late. The 3 sleepless nights, the forgotten meals, none of it mattered. She had to go back to that mansion. Mariah called Bernard, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped her phone. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Bernard, it's Mariah. I need to get into the house. It's urgent. It's about Mrs. Eleanor." "Mariah, you know I can't do that. Mrs. Veronica installed new cameras everywhere. If she finds out I let you in, I'll lose my job too." "I know, Bernard, I know what I'm asking, but please, Mrs. Eleanor's could be in danger. I saw her room was empty on Veronica's Instagram. Where is she? What happened?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Bernard finally spoke, his voice was heavy with concern. "I noticed too. Mrs. Veronica said she was moved to a smaller room on the 1st floor because she was having trouble with the stairs. But Mariah, when I saw Mrs. Eleanor being taken to the new room yesterday, she looked worse than ever. She was barely conscious." Mariah felt sick. Veronica was accelerating the process, and with Richard still away, there was no one to stop her. "Bernard, I have to get in there, just once, just to get concrete proof, please. Not just for Mrs. Eleanor, but because it's the right thing to do." Another long silence. Then Bernard sighed deeply. "Mrs. Veronica is going out tonight. She has a charity dinner with her friends. She's always late for those things, only gets back after midnight. If you come around 9 o'clock, I'll let you in. But you have to be quick, Mariah, very quick." "Thank you, Bernard, thank you from the bottom of my heart," Mariah hung up and started planning. She couldn't make the same mistakes as before. This time she had to be smarter. Veronica had shown she was capable of intercepting emails, erasing evidence, and manipulating any situation to her advantage. Mariah needed a different approach. She needed to send the evidence somewhere Veronica couldn't access. Mariah remembered Richard once mentioning he had a separate corporate email, used only for work matters, which he accessed through a different server. Could this be the email Veronica didn't know about? Mariah had to bet on it. She spent the afternoon searching social media, tech news, sites anywhere Richard Sterling's name appeared with professional contact information. Finally, in an article about technological innovation, she found it. Richard.Sterling, Sterling Innovations, Co-UK. It was his corporate email. Mariah was sure of it. But she needed more than just the video Veronica had deleted. She needed fresh, irrefutable proof that showed what was happening was still happening. She had to get into that house, document the new room where Mrs. Eleanor was being kept, photograph the medications again, maybe even make another recording. But above all, she needed to access something Veronica probably didn't even know existed, the documents about Mrs. Eleanor's inheritance and will. Mariah knew from casual conversations she had overheard over the years that Richard kept important documents in a safe in his office. She didn't know the combination, but she knew where the safe was. If she could somehow access it, she might find evidence of what Veronica was really planning. Because Mariah was certain now, with absolute conviction, that Veronica wasn't just drugging Mrs. Eleanor. There was a bigger plan, something involving money, inheritance, assets. There had to be. At 8:30 that night, Mariah took an Uber to Kensington. She carried a backpack with her fully charged phone, a small flashlight, and a notebook where she had written down everything she needed to do. She also brought the old phone, now fully charged and ready to record again if necessary. The Uber driver dropped her off 2 blocks from the mansion. She walked the rest of the way, her heart beating faster with every step. Bernard was waiting for her at the back gate, the one used by suppliers. His face was tense, worried. "You have half an hour, Mariah, no more. The new cameras have a system I don't really know how to work. If Mrs. Veronica checks on her phone and sees you, we'll both be in trouble." "I'll be quick," Mariah promised. She entered through the kitchen, her steps silent on the familiar floor. The house was eerily quiet, only the sound of the living room clock echoing off the walls. Mariah went straight to Mrs. Eleanor's new room on the first floor, a small claustrophobic room that was once used for storage. The door wasn't locked this time. Mariah pushed it open slowly and felt the air catch in her lungs. Mrs. Eleanor was lying on a simple bed, so different from the luxurious one she had before. The room had no windows, just a small skylight in the ceiling that barely let in any light. There was a strong smell of urine and medicine. Mariah approached the bed, tears already streaming down her face. Mrs. Eleanor looked like she had aged 10 years in 3 days. Her breathing was shallow, irregular, and she was unconscious. "Mrs. Eleanor, it's me, Mariah," she whispered, gently touching the elderly woman's arm. There was no response, not even a twitch. Mariah looked around the room, photographing everything with her phone. The blister packs of medicine piled on the bedside table were even more numerous than before. There were also syringes, vials of liquids Mariah didn't recognize. She photographed everything, every detail, every piece of evidence of this prison disguised as care. Then she heard it. Coming from upstairs, Veronica's voice on the phone. Mariah froze. Veronica wasn't supposed to be home. She was supposed to be at the charity dinner. Mariah moved silently into the hallway, hiding behind a column. Veronica was in the living room, pacing back and forth, the phone glued to her ear. "Mom, I told you everything is under control." Veronica spoke, in a low tone, but the quiet house allowed Mariah to hear every word. "The old woman is barely conscious now. A few more days and her body will just give up. The doctors will say it was old age, organ failure, natural causes. No one will suspect a thing." Mariah felt her blood run cold. She was listening to a confession of a deliberate plan to cause Mrs. Eleanor's end. With trembling hands, she took her phone out of her pocket and started recording the audio. "And the will?" Veronica's mother's voice echoed on speakerphone. "Did you get her to sign it?" "I got it 2 weeks ago, before that meddling housekeeper was fired." Veronica laughed, a cold, calculating sound. "The old fool was so doped up she didn't even know what she was signing. The lawyer I hired did everything perfectly. The will now leaves the mansion, the jewelry, the company shares, everything directly to me. Richard won't even dream his mother changed her mind about the inheritance. And when she finally goes, we'll be rich, Mum. Very rich. And your husband won't suspect?" "Richard, please. He's so busy with his business, he barely pays attention to what's happening in his own house. When it's all over, I'll play the perfect widow, all in black, crying on my Instagram stories. My followers will love me even more. And then, after a respectful amount of time, I'll divorce him, get half of his stuff too, and still have the mother-in-law's inheritance. Perfect, isn't it?" Mariah recorded every word, her heart beating so loud she was afraid Veronica could hear it. When the call finally ended, Mariah waited until Veronica went up to the second floor before she moved. She had to get into Richard's office now, send that audio along with all the photos, and then get out of there before she was discovered. But when Mariah entered the office, she saw something that made her stop. The safe was open. Veronica must have forgotten to close it. Inside, Mariah saw folders, documents, and on top of everything, 2 wills. One was old, yellowed with age, clearly Mrs. Eleanor's original will. The other was new, with fresh paper and recent ink. Maria took both and photographed them page by page. The new will had Mrs. Eleanor's signature, but it was a shaky, almost illegible signature, clearly made by someone not in full control of their faculties. It was proof of the fraud. Maria sent everything to Richard's corporate email: the photos of Mrs. Eleanor's room, the photos of the medications, the images of the two wills, and the audio of Veronica's conversation with her mother. She wrote a detailed message explaining everything, begging Richard to check his work email because Veronica had access to his personal one. She clicked send and watched the progress bar climb. This time she wouldn't be interrupted. This time the truth would reach Richard. When the email finally sent, Maria put her phone away and was about to leave when she heard footsteps coming down the stairs. There was no time to run. The office door opened, and there stood Richard Sterling, still in a travel suit, a suitcase in his hand, clearly just arrived from the airport. "Maria? What are you doing here?" Richard asked, confusion on his tired face. "Veronica told me you were fired." This was exactly what Maria needed. "Mr. Sterling, you need to hear what I have to say. And you need to see what I just sent to your work email. Please, it's about your mother. She's in grave danger." Richard looked at Maria with an expression that mixed exhaustion and irritation. "Maria, Veronica told me you've been acting strangely, that you were obsessed with my mother. She said you even stole some jewelry and were caught using my computer without permission." "It's all a lie, Mr. Sterling. Your wife is manipulating you. She's drugging Mrs. Eleanor, keeping her prisoner in this house. And there's more, much more. Please open your corporate email. I have proof of everything." Richard sighed deeply, but something in the urgency of Maria's voice, in the desperate sincerity in her eyes, made him hesitate. He pulled his phone from his pocket and opened his corporate email. Maria saw his eyes widen as he began to read the message, to see the photos, to listen to the audio. Richard's face grew paler and paler, his hands trembling as he held the phone. "This can't be true," he whispered, but his voice was failing. "It can't be." "It is true, Mr. Sterling. Your mother is in the room on the first floor now. You can go and see her condition with your own eyes, and if you listen to the audio to the end, you will hear your wife admitting everything." Richard pressed play on the audio again, this time listening to the whole thing from beginning to end. When it reached the part where Veronica talked about the forged will, about the plan to let Mrs. Eleanor waste away, Maria saw the transformation in his face. Confusion gave way to understanding, and understanding gave way to a rage she had never seen in that usually calm and controlled man. "Where is my mother?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. Maria led him to the room on the first floor. When Richard saw the state, Mrs. Eleanor was in. He fell to his knees beside the bed, holding his mother's frail hand, tears streaming down his face. "Mum, Mum, it's me, Richard. Please, wake up, please." Mrs. Eleanor stirred slightly, her eyes opening with difficulty. When she recognized her son, a single tear rolled down her cheek. "Richard, finally. I thought you'd never come." Richard stood up, his expression transformed into pure fury. "Where is Veronica?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Before Maria could answer, Veronica herself appeared at the door, still impeccably dressed. "Darling, you're back. When did you get here?" She tried to hug him, but Richard stepped away as if her touch burned. "Don't you dare touch me," he said, his voice cutting. "I heard everything, Veronica, everything. The conversation with your mother, your plans, the forged will. How could you do this? How could you do this to my mother?" Veronica's face went pale, but she quickly tried to regain her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. What has this lying housekeeper told you? She's making up stories, Richard. She wants to destroy our marriage." Richard took out his phone and played the audio. Veronica's voice filled the room, every word a clear and unequivocal confession of her intentions. Veronica tried to grab the phone, but Richard stopped her. "It's over, Veronica. I have all the proof, the photos of the drugs you were giving my mother, the forged will, everything." Veronica realized she was cornered. Her mask of the perfect wife finally fell, revealing the cold, calculating person behind it. "You think that matters?" She practically spat the words. You think anyone will care about a senile old woman who was at the end of her life anyway? I was just speeding up the inevitable. Inevitable? Richard advanced towards her, and Maria saw Bernard appear at the door, drawn by the sounds of the argument. My mother wasn't sick, Veronica. She was healthy until you started drugging her. You were trying to kill her for money. For money. And why not? Veronica laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. Did you think I married you for love? Please, Richard, I married you for the life you could give me. And your mother was in the way of my perfect life. Richard picked up his phone and dialed. Yes, I need to report a crime. My wife attempted to poison my mother and forged legal documents. He gave the address, his eyes never leaving Veronica. The police are on their way. And Bernard, don't let her leave. Veronica tried to run, but Bernard blocked the door. She started screaming, threats mixed with empty promises, saying she knew expensive lawyers, that Richard would regret this. But no one was listening anymore. Richard was with his mother, holding her hand, apologizing for his blindness, for not seeing what was happening right under his nose. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Veronica was handcuffed, still screaming threats, her carefully constructed veneer of perfection completely shattered. Richard gave all the evidence to the officers. The wills, the photos, the audio recordings. They also took the medication packets as evidence. An ambulance was called for Mrs. Eleanor, who was immediately taken to the hospital for treatment and detoxification from the sedatives she had been forced to take for months. Before Maria left, Richard held her by the arm. Maria, I have no words to thank you for what you've done. You saved my mother's life. If you hadn't insisted, if you hadn't risked everything. I just did what was right, Mr. Sterling, Maria said, finally allowing relief to wash over her. When my mother gets out of the hospital, and she will, Richard said with conviction, I want you to come back, not as a housekeeper, but as part of her care team, with a proper salary, benefits, everything. You'll be in charge of coordinating her care, because you've proven you're the only person who truly cares. 3 months passed like a confusing dream for Maria. Mrs. Eleanor spent 3 weeks in the hospital, where doctors slowly detoxified her from the sedatives and helped her regain her strength. Maria visited her every day, bringing Julia along on weekends. Mrs. Eleanor adored the girl, saying she reminded her of herself when she was young, full of energy and curiosity. Veronica's trial was set. She faced charges of attempted murder, forgery, fraud, and several other crimes. The lawyer who had helped forge the will was also indicted and would lose his license to practice law. Veronica's mother was investigated as an accomplice, but claimed she didn't know the extent of her daughter's plans. Maria was officially promoted to house manager and care coordinator for Mrs. Eleanor. Richard hired a nurse to assist, but made it clear that Maria had final authority over all aspects of his mother's well-being. The salary was 3 times what she had earned before, and it came with full health insurance for her and Julia. On a sunny spring afternoon, Maria was on the veranda with Mrs. Eleanor, the two of them sipping tea and watching Julia play in the garden, with a dog Richard had bought to brighten up the house. Mrs. Eleanor was visibly recovered. She had gained weight, and her eyes shone again with life and intelligence. She wore a floral dress and had her hair styled, nothing like the devastated woman Maria had found months ago. You saved my life, Maria, Mrs. Eleanor said, taking Maria's hand and squeezing it tightly. Not just because you got me out of that situation, but because you saw me. When I was disappearing, when I was becoming invisible, you saw me as a human being who deserved care and dignity. Maria felt tears burn in her eyes. You taught me that doing the right thing sometimes means risking everything, and that some people are worth that risk. Richard came out of the house carrying a tray with more tea. He was different now, less stressed, more present. He had drastically reduced his travel, leaving more responsibilities in the hands of his management team. His priority now was his mother and rebuilding the trust that had been broken. The lawyer called today, he said, pouring fresh tea for the 3 of them. The fake will has been officially annulled. Mum's original will is back in effect, and there's more. Veronica accepted a plea deal. She's pleading guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, 15 years. Mrs. Eleanor nodded slowly. That's enough. I don't want revenge, Richard. I just want to live the... A rest of my life in peace, surrounded by the people who truly care about me. And you will have that, Mum. Richard looked at Mariah with gratitude. Thanks to Mariah, you'll have exactly that. Later that evening, after Julia had gone to sleep in the room Richard had specially prepared for her in the mansion, Mariah went out to the veranda. Bernard was there, doing his nightly rounds. They talked for a few minutes about how everything had changed, about how sometimes one person's courage can change the fate of many. Mariah looked up at the stars over Kensington and thought about how her life had come full circle. She had risked everything, her job, her security, her daughter's future, all because she refused to turn her back on a helpless old woman. And in the end, that decision had not only saved Mrs. Eleanor, but had also transformed her own life in ways she could never have imagined. Inside the mansion, warm lights glowed in the windows. It was no longer a cold, oppressive house, but a home, full of laughter, genuine care, and a new family that had been formed not by blood but by choice, courage, and love. Mrs. Eleanor finally had the peace she deserved. Richard had learned the importance of being present. Julia had opportunities Mariah could only dream of. And Mariah, she had the satisfaction of knowing that when it mattered, when it really mattered, she had made the right choice, no matter the cost. And as the night enveloped Kensington in its dark cloak, inside that mansion, 3 generations found what everyone searches for: a place to belong, people who care, and the certainty that, no matter what the future held, they would face it together as a true family.